And just again to mention, there is the last presentation was meant to be the pre-recorded interview about the child neglect strategy. But what I'll do is I'll pop the link to that interview, which is on YouTube, into the chat so you can have a look at it in your own time. But we'll finish off today with Kerry Audie, who's the principal social worker for Herefordshire Children and Families, who will speak about private fostering and awareness raising of private fostering. Over to you, Kerry.
Hello, everybody. I don't need to introduce myself, which is always good because Angela's already done it. But yeah, I'm here today to talk about private fostering awareness. And part of the reason that we need to talk about it is because Ofsted have picked up, and I think it's very clear that we're not aware of all the children who must be in statistically must be in private fostering arrangements in Herefordshire. We're not aware of them, and we haven't done the assessments. I think currently we think there's 1 or 2 children in private fostering arrangements, but that absolutely cannot be right. There must be more children. So I think really today is partly just to go over awareness so that people understand what it is, and also a plea really that you share this and disseminate it within your organisations so that we can start to recognise those children. So I previously worked in Shropshire, very similar demographic to Herefordshire in terms of the county towns, the little towns, and it mainly being rural. And we had in excess of 30 children that we recognised to be in private fostering. So it can't be right. We've also got 6 boarding schools, that some of which also run language school provision. And as I go on, you'll see how children who would attend those schools may very well come under the banner of private fostering and would need to have an assessment by us if they're international students. So I think it is likely that there are children in the county, although it's not impossible that there aren't, but that we don't know about, that we need to be doing the assessment, and we need to be a bit more on top of this. So can we have the next slide, please? So what is private fostering? So private fostering is an arrangement where a child under 16 and under 18, if they have a disability, is cared for by an adult who's not the child's parent or a close family member, and it's been arranged by the parent. So this wouldn't cover kinship care arrangements whereby the local authority has arranged it, placed a child with a grandparent, but we've done a kinship care assessment of that relative. This is if it is sort of privately arranged, and to be defined as private fostering, the child's got to be there for longer than 28 days, and it should be continuous. But if there's the odd day where they stayed somewhere else, it still counts if mainly they have been under the care for 28 days of the person who would be deemed to be the private foster carer. Now, how children from technically, children at boarding school often go home for the school holidays, and whilst they are cared for by guardians or sponsored people in the holidays, because it doesn't exceed the 28 days, they don't come under it. But certainly during COVID, we know that there were children that didn't return to their home country, so presumably were with guardians for a period of longer than 28 days. Okay. Can we have the next slide, please? So the law regarding private fostering changed following the death of Victoria Clembier, because she had been privately fostered by a great aunt who did actually pretend to be her mother, but it turned out was a great aunt who actually Victoria had only met, I think, once before she was brought to this country. And a great deal of the non-intervention by agencies, really, maybe they would have intervened more if they'd understood that she didn't actually have a relationship with this woman. This woman didn't have any parental responsibility for her, so that then the onus has been put upon local authorities to be proactive in trying to find children in potential private fostering arrangements, and for other professionals to kind of tip us off if they think children are in private fostering arrangements. So can we have the next slide, please? So who is a private foster carer? So this is the bit where it does get a little bit complicated and people often have to check which relationships are covered and which aren't. So private fostering can be from the extended family, but they're not a relative as defined under the Children Act. So if it's a grandparent, a brother, a sister, an uncle or an aunt, and that doesn't have to be, that can be an aunt by marriage or civil partnership, or a step parent, but it has to be a step parent by marriage, not by cohabitation, are defined as a relative. So if they're providing alternate care, they're not a private foster carer. But if it's somebody that's another relative or a family friend that's outside of that definition, then they are a private foster carer. Has anybody got any questions about that? Because that's the bit that confounds people. No, but you'd be checking, wouldn't you? To be honest, every single time I've come across this, and I've been dealing with it since 2000, I always have to check. There and aren't there, who fits and who doesn't. But it's important to get that right. Okay. So next slide, please, Angela. So the duty to inform. So the ideal is that if somebody's planning to make a private fostering arrangement, that they would tell us before it actually happened, so that we could assess that arrangement. I'm just turning my heating off because I cheekily put it on thinking I was going to waste a bit of money, and now I'm a bit too hot. So the local authority must be notified at least 6 weeks before the arrangement is due to begin, or as soon as possible if the arrangement is expected to last more than 28 days. Now, it doesn't always run as smoothly as that in reality. You know, sometimes people have thought that they'd get somebody else to look after their kids for 2 weeks and then it becomes longer. You know, in reality, people aren't going to get in trouble for having done it at least 6 weeks before if there have been circumstances around that. But it's important that whenever we found out about it, even if it's an arrangement, you know, I've had it that actually an extended relative has been acting as a private foster carer for literally years and nobody's picked up on it yet. But it's still, even if it's a really established situation, it still should be referred in so the assessment can be done at that point. So the person who proposes to foster the child must notify the appropriate authority at least 6 weeks before the arrangement is due to begin. Sometimes people don't know that, you know, which is important why we do the awareness raising. And the person with parental responsibility who's arranging the situation or is aware of the situation. So that might be that you've got two people with parental responsibility who live separately. You know, even if then the parent that hasn't had care of the child, they're still under obligation to inform the local authority. So that obviously that can happen in you know, by people ringing into the MASH. What I would say is, if you're not sure whether it constitutes private fostering or not, refer it in, and MASH will sort it out. Do you know what I mean? They will look at that situation and work out how it needs to be assessed and whether it fits into the private fostering regs. And it's better to have referred in and them looked over it and said actually it doesn't because of this or that technicality, rather than not referred in at all. So what I would say is, if in doubt, tell MASH anyway, and MASH will then sort it out. Next one, please, Angela. So examples of private fostering arrangements, and you know, there's a range of different scenarios really. So children whose parents are unable to care for them due to illness, abuse, separation or imprisonment, but they're not living with a close relative. So lots of reasons there. This is quite common, and the next one, I think, and I really suspect that we probably do have some children in Herefordshire under this next one. Children or young people living with their boyfriend or girlfriend's family, if they're under 16 or under 18, if they could be deemed to have a disability. Children and young people at boarding schools who do not return home during the holidays and stay with a host family in the UK, or children who come over to language schools for a period of longer than 28 days. So again, children are not living with close relatives due to parental adolescent conflict. Children arrive in the UK seeking asylum or for medical or educational purposes and are living with adults who are not close relatives. I've also had it where children have been brought over to work, actually, where, you know, a group of extended relatives have come over to complete seasonal work and have brought 14 and 15-year-olds with them, but there isn't actually anybody with them that would come under the close relative tag. So that would be an example of a private fostering arrangement as well. Any questions about that? The next one, please. So roles and responsibilities. So parents or private foster carers have a responsibility to notify the local authority. If it's for a period, it's likely to be longer than 28 days. The notification must be made within 6 weeks of the proposed arrangement or as soon as they are aware of if it's less than 6 weeks ahead. The person with parental responsibility must continue to exercise it or delegate that to the person who's the private foster carer. So the expectation would be that the person who is the legal parent will still have some level of oversight of that arrangement. So that, you know, there would be regular contact between the child and the legal parent, or there would be regular contact between the person who's providing the private foster care and the parent. So the local authority isn't going to be taking, even though they're going to do an assessment, they're not taking over parental responsibility. The expectation still will be that that parent will make sure that that arrangement is suitable for their child and have a degree of surveillance and kind of knowledge about what's going on there. So the parent or the person with parental responsibility remains financially responsible for the child, so that they will, you know, that they will be the ones that will provide things that the child needs. Although private foster carers can claim benefits for the period that the child lives with them, if the parent is still receiving benefits in relation to that child, they won't. So the expectation would be then that there would usually, what would happen, particularly if it's a temporary arrangement, is really and truly you should tell the DWP and the benefits should transfer over to the private foster carer. But if it's a seriously temporary arrangement, sometimes people will make an agreement, well, I'll give you the child's benefit money whilst you're looking after them. But it is the parent's responsibility, or the person that's got PR, to sort that out. There won't be, again, this is not a child that be considered to be a looked after child, so there is no way that the local authority have got of supporting that arrangement financially. Okay, next one, please. So the roles and responsibilities of partner agencies is that really you would be checking that out with the families that you work with. If you think that it's a private fostering arrangement, that you talk to them, check out whether you think it is or not. And if you do think it is, or you suspect it might be, that you notify the local authority through the MASH. That, you know, you reassure the carer that there'll be, it's not about us, you know, immediately removing that child, but it's just about us having an oversight of that situation and checking it's appropriate, which most of the time it absolutely will be. The adults are aware of the need to notify. If they refuse to comply, you still have to pass it on. The expectation would be, as a partner agency, that you still would pass on that information. You don't need their consent to refer it into MASH. And in actual fact, there have been a number of situations that have come to serious case review where partner agencies haven't passed it on because of lack of consent, or because they say, well, we weren't sure what the relationships were. You know, they said they were an aunt and we didn't, you know, but later it's perceived, well, they didn't check that out enough. They should have done. And agencies have been, you know, kind of held to account to say, well, really and truly, you should have passed that on to the local authority. if in doubt, the expectation is that you ask to see documents, that you ask to see birth certificates, you ask to see asylum registration cards. Certainly, the situation with Victoria Clembier was that she was on another child's passport. If people had actually checked the passport, they would have seen that the photo wasn't her, because while she was in this country, people were calling her Anna, and that was because she'd actually travelled in on another child's passport. And so if people had actually asked to see the passport, it quickly would have become apparent that something was very wrong, you know, and that she, you know, I guess then people would have asked her, well, you're not this child, and you know, if people had asked for the documents, it's very likely that she would have been saved. So I think, you know, it's imperative that people do that. I guess it you know, if I was sitting where you are now, I'd be thinking, goodness, do you know what I mean? This seems like an awful lot of things to have to ask and check. But in reality, you know, this is a relatively rare occurrence, but it is one that everybody does need to be aware of, and aware of their, like, quite high level of responsibility within it, really, because, you know, we obviously haven't been covering this in the way that we ought to have been. It's one of the things that Ofsted have picked up, that collectively, as a group of agencies, we've not been exercising our responsibilities appropriately. So, you know, we desperately need to improve, really. Next one, please, Angela. Partner agency practitioners also have a duty to follow up and check with MASH to ensure that the arrangement has been notified, as failure to notify can place the child at risk. So if you've spoken to the person that you think is the private foster carer, and they've said that they will tell MASH rather than you doing it, you need to check that they've done that. Them telling you that they will isn't in and of itself enough. You need to check that they have. Contribute to the assessment like you always would by providing relevant information. Monitor the child's welfare and progress, and provide support to the carer, which presumably, if you're involved, you're going to be doing that anyway. Be involved in ongoing liaison with the child's social worker or the family placement team to address any welfare concerns or unmet needs of the child as identified. Because if that child is in a private fostering situation, we do then have a duty to carry on checking on their welfare, making visits to them, checking the arrangement is meeting their needs. So they will be open to the fostering service if it's deemed it's a private fostering situation. So there wouldn't be looked after children's reviews. You're not going to be invited into meetings about that child, but there would be an expectation that you provide a regular update to the fostering team about your service's involvement with that child. Next one, please, Angela. So identifying private fostering arrangements, they're often hidden and difficult to identify, and not many people are aware of the duty to notify the local authority. I think, if I'm honest, having worked in urban and rural areas, because it's something that happens relatively frequently in urban areas. So when I worked in London, it was virtually a daily thing. Do you know what I mean? We had families, we had lots of asylum seeking families, we had lots of families where culturally it was perhaps a bit more of a prevalent thing that people would be looking after relatives from the extended family. So people were very aware of it then. You know, we had specific people who worked on private fostering. I think that you know, my experience of working in more rural areas is that usually people aren't as aware, just because it doesn't happen as often. Although I would say that in areas where there are seasonal workers, it's usually relatively common. And I know we have less seasonal workers now than we used to, but you know, we must have had the older end of the age range people here that were in private fostering arrangements. So professionals who have contact with the children obviously have a key role in identifying and letting us know so that we can work with these families. And then it goes on to list people that might very well be in those situations. So it's obvious things like GPs, nurses, teachers, health visitors, youth workers, and they, you know, that we need for everybody to understand what private foster arrangements are, so they can make the appropriate referrals, because it is very unlikely and very rare in my experience that people will self-refer. It's nearly always from a professional identifying it and telling us that they need to. Next one, please, Angela. So the roles and responsibilities of the local authority, they need to consider that child to be a child in need, and they need to look at whether they need to provide support services and provide support to the private foster carer as specified under the Children's Act. Next one, please. So the duty of the local authorities to visit the premises and check that the child will be cared for, and to check the suitability within a week. So go out within a week to check that there's reasonable arrangements for their care. Visit and speak to the proposed private foster care and the people living with the foster carer. Visit and speak to the child alone to ascertain the child's wishes and feelings. Speak to the person who has got parental responsibility for the child, and investigate any other matters that they believe to be reasonable for that child. So, you know, checking there's a school place, checking they're registered with the GP, all the things that we would ordinarily check, just to make sure that things are in place for children. Next one, please, Angela. Sharing information with the local authority. So you might know all of this and you might not, but what I would say is obviously get as many details as you can, but I wouldn't delay referring if there's some stuff that you don't know. So quickly whiz through it because we're running out of time. Information about the basic information about the child, cultural ethnic background, personal preference, education, hobbies, full details of the person that's giving the notice that they're going to be a private foster carer, the date on which the private arrangement will start or has started, any convictions that are known to you, and any court orders relating to the child. So some of this, in my experience, it's taken us quite a long time to get to the bottom of, and you wouldn't necessarily know all of this, before really you ought to make a referral into the MASH. So if you do, brilliant, but you know, really, if you think it's a private fostering arrangement, whatever details you've got, bang the referral in. Next one, please, Angela. So keeping everybody informed, what the social worker will do is visit the child and speak with them alone within the first week and at least 6 weekly thereafter, complete a children and families assessment, speak with the parent or the person with PR, and give advice around benefits and general support. And what the private foster carer will do is make the local authority aware of any changes in circumstances, any criminal convictions they or anyone living at the address acquires, and advise the local authority in writing if the arrangement comes to an end. Next one, please. So further contacts. We have got some advice leaflets, haven't we, Angela, and postcards for people to have, yay, that are going to be are they going to be distributed, or that they've been sent out?
Yeah, we're just waiting for the printing to be done, and then we're planning to take them out to some different forums. So like the schools forum that I understand is happening in July, and anything else that's happening in person. But you can also get in touch with us on that admin.sbu email to see how we can get it out to you. And, you know, they'll be available to either pick up at Plough Lane, or we can find a way to get them out to you.
Yeah. And we'd be really appreciative if people have got ideas about where they think they can go, and, you know, where, I guess it's where there's a lot of footfall, you know, it would be really useful, just so we're generally like raising awareness about private fostering and the regulations around it. Has anybody got any questions?